I'm Sarah Canney, and this is my live Instagram show, Showing Up, Courageous Conversations with Women Who Are Following Their Heart. Hi friends, I hope you're having a fantastic Wednesday. My name is Sarah Canney, and I am the author of the blog Run.Fargirl.com, and I'm also the founder and host of the women's running retreat, Rise.Run.Retreat, which is a 4-day women's running retreat that's based out of New England. So that's a little bit about me, and this is my Instagram live show, which is called Showing Up. And I'm calling it that because the women who I bring on each week are showing up in their lives in a big way, taking risks and pursuing their hopes and dreams and following their heart. And so this show is really about having a conversation in regards to what it takes to make your ideas and your dreams a reality. A lot of times we chat with people after they've arrived and after they've experienced success, and sometimes we don't get the full picture of what it took to get to where they are. So that's really what I am trying to do here with these conversations, is talk about the struggles and the obstacles and the failures and how you move through those things, and stay persistent and stay hopeful and stay encouraged and actually make your ideas a reality. So today I'm really excited to bring on Cristin Zaimes. Cristin was my physical therapist when I was returning to running after having my kids, and she has a doctorate in physical therapy. She specializes in pelvic floor rehabilitation, and she's incredibly knowledgeable. So I had the chance to work with Cristin when I came back from both my second pregnancy and my third pregnancy. Oh. Well, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in like 3 years. Well, yeah, my youngest is almost 4, so 4 years. So.
Wow.
So it's been a while.
You seem to be doing well.
Yes, well, thanks to you. So, but I was kind of getting into the story of how I first went to see you, which was back in 2012 after I had Jack. And I believe that you were subletting a massage therapist's room when I
was rogue
with you. Yeah, it was very early on, I think.
Yeah, I hopped around a couple different places before I actually built out a studio.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's with no capital, you sort of sneak in somebody else's place, and all I needed was a room.
Yeah.
So I just needed a room, and even all of the logistics of setting up insurance numbers and provider numbers, that takes a while.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of back end work that it helped when I was just out of somebody else's studio and I didn't have to worry about all that.
Yeah. So why don't we kind of backtrack a little bit, since I jumped in right when I first saw you, but tell me a little bit, if you could give people a little bit of background in terms of sort of why you chose to specialize in health, and then also kind of talk about your transition to starting your own thing.
Okay. So I worked at a hospital, and I loved it there. They provided a lot of education, a lot of collaboration with other practitioners, and that was really helpful. What I never did well with was big systems, and when people or systems work in a certain way and the answer is, well, that's the way we do it, doesn't really sit well with me. I don't like that answer. And there was women's health in particular was just such an evolving profession. It was like a dimension that was just opened, and the floodgates opened, because it's just so many women need this type of support. But really, it was a little bit more nerd-based or selfish how I got into it, just because I was mostly orthopedic and spine. I've had some back dysfunction since I was younger, and I was always sort of trying to understand that and help other people. But with women particularly, I thought, like, why are some women getting like 30% better, or, a little bit, but it wasn't doing it. And so when I had a kid, it was like this aha of like, oh my God, this is the connection. Like, why aren't we talking about this whole area? And I, sometimes when I talk, I joke that the song Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes, like, hello, misses a huge area in the middle. And it's such an important area. And now that I understand it and can evaluate it more thoroughly, I see the connections with the neck, the way the shoulders move, the way you run, foot placement. It's such a dynamic reactionary area. And when it's dysfunctional, which in our culture it is quite often, for me, it was such the missing link that helped people. And now I feel much more successful treating people, that I feel like I have all the puzzle pieces to help put them together. So that was kind of my journey into pelvic health, but I always knew that I wanted to do my own thing. I mean, I really even chose this profession over, going into medicine or a PA. There's lots of professions that I kind of explored, but I just knew the physical therapy, I had the ability to be autonomous and grow a business. And so when I started doing this niche and it started growing, I just knew that it was a little bit of a safety net where I just felt like I wasn't competing against a million other practices out there. It just was something that was a need. And so that provided me a little bit of a safety net to jump into it when I did.
Yeah. I think anytime that you, especially whatever business you're in or as an entrepreneur, if you can find that need that's not being met and then go and fill that need, like you're right, you have like this automatic safety net built in.
Yeah.
A line out the door. So, what was that transition like from sort of being under the umbrella of a hospital and all the things that go with full-time employment to going off on your own? Like what was that transition like?
Yeah, there were pros and cons. I mean, the hospital I was working in was getting kind of crazy because I was kind of the one-woman show and I was everywhere and my kids were little, which meant that, I just hoped to get through a workday without getting a call that somebody had a fever or something like that. So it was chaotic for sure. But the benefits were that I was creating. So I felt like the needs that I saw, I was able to meet them. So the quality that suffered in some of the places that I saw, right away, I could spend an hour with somebody. And there was just so much more ability to be creative and meet the needs and not fall into the system. So that for me is just, even now when I look back in some of the days, I think, nope, I'm throwing in the towel. This is all too hard, which happens for sure. I just think of myself in a system and being told to do it a certain way without the creativity, or if something doesn't make sense and getting that answer, I just don't think I could be in that environment. It just doesn't, that does not sit well with me. Mm-hmm. So I think you just have to do it. You just sort of like, you're in chaos anyway, and you just go with it. Mm-hmm. And I kind of just jumped. So, and to be honest, like, I think a lot of physical therapists, they will get a capital, a chunk of change to set things up. And I didn't. And so, which is why you saw me in a massage room.
But it worked.
It worked.
So
like, I knew I didn't need a ton, right? I didn't have a lot of capital needs. But I do have to say, I also had the safety net of my husband working and having insurance. And so I would, be remiss to say that, if I didn't have that, would I have jumped when I did? No, I think I would have needed a lot more financial support. And, I think that the stability that he had provided me some of that, support to go forward. So,
yeah.
With this insurance system, it can be super risky if you don't have that support or if you don't have that safety net. And I think it's an absolute barrier for some people. I think they just are like, no way, I don't have that ability, which is too bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely true. I mean, my husband and I are both self-employed, so the whole insurance piece has always been transitional and different, and we're always trying to figure it out. But, I think, like you said, we're always kind of living in chaos, so it's not a big deal if things, go
Yeah.
wrong, but you figure it out. Um, so what do you think, what were some of the biggest obstacles you faced once you went out on your own, once you established started taking on clients as you were growing? What were some of the biggest obstacles that you faced?
I think the healthcare system is probably the biggest obstacle that I faced, and I still do, because it's like a game that changes every year. And it's so unfortunate because patients really don't understand it, and we barely do, and we do it every day, and it's so variable. And to be honest, they are so manipulative, and you get an answer. They, when they decide to deny things in women's health, especially, they deem some things not medically necessary if it has to do with sexual function, which is an absolute ridiculous piece of the insurance system that I find myself wanting to lobby all the time, but I don't have time to figure out what focus groups are deciding that women's sexual function is not a priority, or it doesn't have to be covered, when erectile dysfunction is. So isn't that interesting? So it's things like that I find myself, I can go down a rabbit hole of getting pretty ticked off about that, because it's one of those, like, not fair, this is ridiculous, or just making a business plan when you don't know what the cost is, or the price, really. So you're making a business plan saying, okay, I'm going to see 10 people a day. That's a lot, but and this is what the price is. Well, that's not what you're going to get if you go by insurance. So one insurance company might give you $60. One insurance might give you $150. All of those amounts are lower than the same treatment given to a hospital negotiated contract. So it's a lot of BS. And so you have to make financial plans based on estimates, really. So that, I think, always continues to be a challenge. The benefit I had was I never had to spend a dime on marketing, really, initially, because it was such a need, and I had some physicians that I knew. And so where I think a lot of practitioners go out and they have to spend a lot on getting clients in the door, that was never a problem, which was a benefit for sure.
Yeah. So kind of once you established yourself and you were taking on clients as an individual, when did you make the transition to having a runner? Kind of, there isn't a ton out there about, I mean, there's obviously more than there was 6 years ago when I first came.
Yeah.
But there's not a ton out there in regards to pelvic floor health, running through pregnancy, running postpartum. There's not a lot of research out there. Like, there's just not information. There's no education around that, or there's very little education.
Yeah. And I do say it is, like, the last 5 years, I think, have been drastically different, what you can see out there. But I think what frustrates me still is that the whole medical community isn't facilitating this over and over and over again. This should be something, you want to have a child? This information is great. Here, look at these resources, even just as a prep or understanding what you're going to go through, or maybe how to optimize it. And then, running or exercising through it. That requires guidance and education, because the education we get is like zilch. And then let alone that like fourth trimester and that after period where it's like you go and get a handshake, a high five at 6 weeks. It's like, yep, you're good. Run, have sex, do whatever. And you're like, what? Pretty sure that's not what's really supposed to be happening right now.
Yeah, there's a huge gap in that, like you said, that fourth trimester, that like, labor delivery to that 6 to 8 weeks, where it's
Yeah.
like okay, you should be normal by now, but if you're not educated on pelvic floor health, if you haven't been working on it, like exercise wise and rehabbing, you're probably not good to go at 6 to 8 weeks.
No, and whatever form the baby came out, it's a pretty decent trauma. So you cesarean, oh yeah, all my vagina's fine. Well, no, like it's a major abdominal surgery. And if you had a vaginal delivery, in order for that to happen, yes, normal, but it's a decent trauma, and to understand how to just rehab it properly. I mean, most women going into a delivery don't really know how to optimize their pelvic floor. And it's not just about the Kegel, it's how to relax the pelvic floor. And really that's how the baby will come out better. I always tell people that come before they have a baby that usually have pain, they usually have something wrong, that this is the best thing that ever happened to you, because I'm going to tell you how and where your pelvic floor is so that you can use it in delivery. Because most women going into delivery have no idea how to actually elongate and open the pelvic floor, which is really how the birth is supposed to happen a lot easier. And so if you're bearing down and there's pain, you might actually be closing and doing the opposite thing. So that alone, just going into it, easy birth, and then those hours after where you're breathing and saying, oh, return to what you should be doing, pelvic floor, that would go miles as with rehab. But it's also where it goes wrong.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think back to my 3 experiences, and I even had sort of an alternative experience with a birth center birth and then home birth, and and they're like the focus is on sort of the fetal health and then maternal health, but even with the alternative route that I took, where you think like maybe, oh, there'd be something there.
Yeah.
Nothing about pelvic floor, nothing about like how to, I took a hypnobirthing class, and that was the breathing and the relaxing, but there wasn't that sort of physical description. I mean, I identify with it, I think, because I'm an athlete, and so I can kind of identify the muscle groups that I'm, trying to engage and work. But if like I didn't get that and I'm pretty aware of my body, then what is somebody who's like not really super active, maybe not quite so aware of their body, what are they getting? Like nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
No, it's all about the baby. Like the delivery is the finish line, high five, check off the list. And you're like, I mean, to be honest, I went in there, and after they told me after the vaginal delivery, and then you bleed for several weeks, I was like, wait, what? You do? I'm like, how did nobody tell? Like, why am I so surprised? And I'm in this field, and it was like that experience after. I was an absolute surprise. And so I just thought, this is a shame. Like, things are going to feel harder when they're a surprise, or then you're going to feel like this is weird, like something's wrong, which is going to make you shut down. So, I mean, it's, great to understand the health of the baby, but part of the health of the baby is, you feeling better and recovering. I mean, I think I see so many women also like 5-6 months that are just toast, and part of that is not recovering themselves. So I just think it's just a shame that it's coming, but it's still like a slow moving train. I'd like it to speed up a little bit.
So tell me a little bit about the programs that you have at Oceanside now, and sort of what you are doing there to educate and treat your patients. And
yeah, so we have a wide variety of programs, because people we treat, so one group, unfortunately, because of the lack of support, a lot of women find themselves in pain for a long time. And so we do a lot around pain and understanding how comprehensive pain is. And birth trauma is one example where, you know, if you have an injury, say you have a pelvic floor injury that's tied with the emotions and the intensity around a delivery, it's going to be mapped in your brain different than, you know, if it was an injury while you were biking in a race. And so understanding the complexity around pain and how it affects you physically and from a brain networking perspective, we do a lot of work around that. We do work with athletes. We do a lot of work around athletes of just analyzing their gait or their mechanics and understanding how, you know, I'm going to put core in like quotes, but it's just all of those muscles, how well they're firing, and the synergy of the body that should actually be like an easier mechanical system. And a lot of times we find that, like, I know, do you mind if I talk about you for a sec?
Oh, go for it.
So I remember, like, you know, of course, at like mile 300 or something like that, that you're like, you have like a tiny hip pain or, you know, but it's, but it's evident that there was, you know, one aspect wasn't firing as much. And we talked a lot about like going uphill and downhill and the mechanics and firing differently and where your rib cage is and how the glutes are firing. And so even at a high level of athletic performance, you know, some of those mechanical differences make a big difference. And so if you don't know how to optimize some of those mechanics, and you don't know where those muscles are, which the pelvic floor is a good example of, like most women have been told. So they're like, where is it? And a lot of those deeper muscles should really be automatic, and they sort of get screwy and don't become automatic anymore when we mess up some of our breath patterns and mechanics. And so it's really the awareness that we teach, and trying to find optimal firing positions. And so whether you're a CrossFit lifter, or you're going on walks with your stroller, or you're, you know, running up mountains, it sort of doesn't matter. Like, I don't have to know everything. You just tell me what you do. I'll watch you do it, and I'll say, oh, I see this is how it's not happening well. So we do a lot of that analysis, in addition to some of, like, if your pelvic floor is not firing well and why, we do internal work. We'll do dry needling. We do a lot of creative things to make it work well. And then it's how to teach you how to feel it work well in whatever you want to do. Mm-hmm. So we have classes, we have some online programs. You know, nothing ever is going to replace an individual session of me watching you walk or lift or, you know, pick up something. But we do our best to give a lot of information to lay the groundwork so that you can work, because a lot of people, you know, it's hard to schedule appointments. I get it. But I would have to say, even a couple appointments, like, this isn't the regular physical therapy where you have to like go for 8 weeks, 2-3 times a week. That's not how we roll. We definitely do like phases. And if you came in and said, hey, I have this issue, I could give you a ton of information and give you a head start. And even if that's all you can handle at that point, you come back in 3 months, it's going to make changes. Mm-hmm. So I think looking at it too, not as kind of the old model, but looking at it, what you want, what do you need?
Yeah. I mean, I can remember coming in, it must have been after Liam, but coming in postpartum, and we primarily worked on upper body, like rib mobility, shoulder mobility. I can remember like doing some twists or so, I don't know, something, but it was, you were looking at the whole chain. You were looking at like, well, how is this movement affecting everything down the line? And it's all connected.
It's a head to toe type of thing. The pelvic floor just tends to be in the middle. They can make it all screwy, or it reacts to something.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I get asked a lot, just because of the way that I've written about pelvic floor on my blog and sort of shared my own experiences, women kind of writing to me and saying, I have a prolapse. My doctor told me I should never run again. So, I mean, obviously every person is different.
Bad doctor.
Yeah. But what kind of like success rate do you have in terms of taking someone who does have a prolapse and sort of returning them into Like, what does that look, returning them into regular activity? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think one, it depends on why. So is it like the front wall, the back wall? Is it because their skin has lost some integrity? You know, it's really helpful to understand what. It's not just like the insides falling out. Like, how is it, so that the support and the exercises actually really support what's maybe more of the dysfunction. So I think that's a really helpful piece of it. But then teaching you the awareness of, you know, how to fire something. So, you know, potentially if you had a lot of laxity and you're a marathon runner, you're like, that's a tough sell, but you could have support. I mean, so there's pessaries, there's support systems, and they don't work for everybody, but they work darn well for some people. So it's just like, if you had an ACL tear, like which is a ligament in your knee, you know, it's kind of looking at like that. It can be partially torn, it can be lax, it can be a little wobbly. Do you have to have surgery? No, you don't have to. Maybe if you're a professional football player, you would, to optimize it. But there's a ton you can do to optimize the muscles around it and the stability and how your hip's firing. So it's kind of like that. It's kind of like looking at it as just laxity, is like, okay, it's not as great as it was, but it can be darn good for what you need it to be. And understanding the pressures and how you're breathing, how you're lifting, and how you're moving, so that you're optimizing that system. That's really what it's about.
Yeah.
And so I would never ever tell somebody, no, you can't do it. It's like, well, let's see.
Yeah. Let's figure out a way. So
let's figure out a way.
Yeah. And I think that's the piece that's missing from, you know, if someone were to go to their doctor or their OBGYN or whatever it is, the piece that's missing is the let's try and see, you know, it's that knowledge piece of like not knowing what needs to happen in order for it to maybe be a possibility, you know, to find the workaround and, you know, work on it until you can get it back to a place where it's workable.
Yeah. And unfortunately, most medical providers, it's not a functional education they have in medical school. So, you know, it's find it, fix it, what's wrong, medicine, surgery, you know, and very helpful in a lot of different avenues. But as far as optimizing function, that's not their gig.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, they're not given that information.
Mm-hmm. So along your sort of path to becoming a business owner, who are the people who you kind of ask for help along the way, or like, where do you find, what's your source of encouragement to keep you going when, like you said, like the things can get really frustrating, whether it's health insurance or other aspects of running a business? Like, where do you go to kind of help you out?
I sometimes put myself in like my own little institution where I'll like just take a day off or two and like color and watch the birds. Like, I definitely need to tell myself to reset. And I have learned to strategize my days where I'm a solitude person. Like, I definitely think. So we have a dog, and the hiking, the walks that I take, I make sure, you know, even though I want to listen to another podcast, sometimes I don't, you know. So I just have to create boundaries for myself, and remember to go out with friends and, you know, just do those things, even though because there's 50 million things you could do otherwise that you'd still probably like to do, but you just have to stop. I think one thing I started doing too was going to bed. Like, I just go to bed. Like, I have to go to bed. That's a cycle that if I stay up and then those habits get out of they just get away from me. Like, yeah, go to bed.
Yeah. But the not going to bed at a reasonable hour can definitely compound, and it catches up to you after a while.
Yeah. There's a lot of people like me, entrepreneurial pelvic floor therapists. A lot of us have created our own businesses and have a lot of, you know, have the same passions of changing the healthcare system, that sort of thing. And so there's, you know, some Facebook groups of people that are doing just the same thing I am, and clinically and professionally, they're a support group for exactly what I'm doing. But I have friends that also will remind me that like good friends, it'll be like, you kind of look like crap. Like, like, right. I gotta, yeah, I do. You're right. I am not, I'm too much. I gotta dial it back. Yep. Yep.
That's good. Yeah, that's so important to have kind of a circle of people who help you out, keep you in check.
Yeah,
Good.
for sure.
Good. So on this live show, I tend to have some a local audience, but then also sort of people all over the country. So for people who are local, where can they find you? How can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so our website, oceansidept.com, and that's being revamped right now. So we have a newer, sexier version coming out in a couple months, but which will have a lot more functionality to it. But you know, I try to post on Instagram. My Instagram, I want it to be patient-centered. So the nuggets that I post, it's kind of the stuff I talk about all day in practice. So that's Oceanside PTNH. And then, you know, we have online courses and pieces of information that we put out, and it's really all educational driven. So just check us out there.
Yeah, so for people who are sort of watching from afar, they can access those online courses at on your website.
Yep, on our website.
Fantastic. Great. Well, Cristin,
thank you.
Chat a lot more about everything, but I want to be sensitive of your time and your busy day. So, but thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me for a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. This was great.
Right. Fantastic. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Yeah, have a good one.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye. All right. So I thought that was great. I mean, I really could talk to Cristin for a really long time about running and pelvic floor health and all that jazz, because I definitely think, I mean, my experience 6 years ago was that there was no education around pelvic floor. It was very hard to come by in terms of running during pregnancy, running postpartum, what should you do, what shouldn't you do. So thankfully Cristin was local and I was able to go see her, and she definitely has helped me out. So be sure to check out their website. They do have a couple different courses on there. And their Instagram is a great resource, as she mentioned. So that's oceansidept.com. And then the Instagram handle is oceansideptnh. So check them out. Next week, I'm going to have on my good friend, Debbie Parker, who is the owner of Deborah Zoe Photography. She's a wedding photography in the North Shore, the Boston area, and she has been in the business. She's taken some love recaptured shots for us. Our wedding photos were actually on slides, and some of them were printed and some were on slides. Like those were our wedding photos. So Debbie was able to recreate our wedding photos, and we did a love recaptured photo shoot with her, and it was amazing. And so we have these beautiful images that she created. She's also taken some family photos for us as well, but she's been at the photography business for a while, and she's a mom of 2, and I am excited to chat with her about how she's grown her business and how she got started. That'll be a lot of fun. And again, I wanted to thank our sponsor for today's show, which is TriggerPin. TriggerPin is a muscle roller that I use all the time, pretty much. It's fantastic. So you can check that out on tpinmuscletherapy.com. And if you want to snag one, you can use code RUNFAR for 10% off. They are sponsoring the show, and I really appreciate that. And that's all I've got for today, guys. I hope you have a fantastic Wednesday, and I will see you next week as we chat with Debbie Parker.